Hi, folks. It's Monday, October 21st, and I wanted to start this podcast by acknowledging, by all current measures, the election is really close. It's a nail biting time, and the only antidote I've found to alleviate my anxiety is taking small actions toward the world I want to see. Here are some of the actions I've taken in the last month: encouraging family and friends to register and vote, postcarding and phone banking in the swing states, and canvassing for a congressional district that went to Biden in 2020, whose current congressman is as MAGA as you can get. As an introvert, putting myself out there in these ways isn't the most natural thing in the world, but there's cover in the solidarity of doing these activities with my fellow citizen volunteers. Together, we can get through anything. I'm very pleased to share this interview with Steven Borne of New Hampshire with you. A few notes. It was recorded on October 2nd, just after the vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And there are a few factual errors in this discussion, which I've corrected in the show notes. Despite these gaffes, this interview is chock full of very good insights about how we can collectively contribute to making our little d democracy work for everyone in our communities. Hope you enjoy listening to this interview as much as I enjoyed discussing all things New Hampshire politics with Steven. Welcome to the Ground Game podcast. Today, we are joined by Steven Borne, a nonpartisan activist out to reform how democracy works in New Hampshire. I first learned about Steven from Katie Fahey, whose organization, The People, is working with Steven on the New Hampshire Together Assemblies initiative. I'm excited to talk politics with Steven, as I don't know much about New Hampshire politics and can't wait to find out more about how Steven is working to depolarize politics in his home state. Welcome, Steven.
Thank you.
So I love starting with this question, just getting to know people. So were you always interested in politics?
Absolutely not. I grew up in a household where, both my parents voted all the time. And then, when I went to the University of New Hampshire, I was a mechanical engineer, getting my minors in business and ocean engineering. And, some of these kids, they were into like the Sandinistas and this and all these political causes. And it's like, who had time? I worked, and then I was playing rugby at the end, and I used to joke that I was a member of the political party of the uninformed. And all those white T-shirts? That's us. The back of those political signs? That's us. Anyone ever call you and no one was there? That was us. But I had no time. And it wasn't until I went to get my MBA at nights. And when I finished that, I'm living in New Hampshire, and it's like, I'm gonna get involved in this presidential primary thing. So that was in the late 90s. And since then, I'm one of the many, many people that put in the effort to try to make sure they hear every single candidate, regardless of party. And, you get to know the people, you start seeing them at different events, and we really try to make sure that we listen to everybody. If you're going to make an effort to run, I'm going to make the effort to listen. And so I did that and said, all right, I sort of like Bill Bradley. And I said, I'm going to do everything I can to help Bill Bradley. And I was out there canvassing. I was working with a campaign. I was single at the time. My house turned into a dormitory. It was people from all over the country. It was neat. And then, Bill Bradley lost. And one of the takeaways was like, it was such an inefficient use of resources. It just bugged me. And that was, how I started to get involved. So it wasn't so much, political anything. I'm going to see if I can do something. And that was the beginning of it in the late 1990s.
Wow. The one thing that a lot of people who are politics nerds like me know about New Hampshire is it's the first primary. In a lot of ways, there's so much emphasis put on the New Hampshire primary because, like you said, everybody gets a shot. Everybody gets a fair hearing there. So New Hampshire is kind of like a filter for the rest of us of like, if you have 20, 40 candidates, you guys like listen to all of them and then let us know what you think. And you let us know first. So it's really become, I mean, it's back and forth about the primary system and what needs to happen to reform the primary system. But the New Hampshire primary is very important nationally.
Yeah, because it's such a small state, it's affordable. And the people, the candidates, they put the effort, the people show up. There's an incredible track record of people showing up, being at events. And it's really neat because you're at these small events and you actually get to talk to the candidate. They bring their spouse. You talk, yeah, hang out and talk with the spouse. And I've dragged our boys through a lot of this. And the oldest one's a junior in college, the other one's a senior in high school. And they have no problem going nose to nose with Mike Pence and I think it was Doug, I forget Doug Bragmus, the guy from
Doug Bergman, or is that how you pronounce? Yeah.
Yeah. Asking him questions. I think it was Asa Hutchinson, I think it was the governor. He asked my oldest son asked a question and about climate change, and he's like, blah, blah, blah. And our son's like, so you don't have a policy, is what you just said. And so you could, you're having those direct conversations, and people call them out when they're full of it.
Yeah, that sounds like so New England to me. As coming from Virginia, that sounds very New England to me, like being very direct and very to the point. And also the whole thing with like communities being smaller and showing up for things. Like my friend lives in New Hampshire and there's like a town meeting still in New Hampshire where she lives.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So you have like the politics of direct democracy on a very small scale, on a local scale. So what's your background in politics? Because I read that you did like run for an office, and that experience also informed what you're doing.
That was about it. So, like I said, I'm not political, but in 2022, and I appreciated you with Katie Fahey calling it gerrymandering. They gerrymandered it again, and they created a new flotorial district, and which means that every town with 3,000, so we've got the 400-person state legislature. So it works out to 3,300 people should have a rep. And if you have a town with at least that much, you should have a dedicated rep. So our town's got, 5,200. We should have a dedicated rep. We don't. The town next to us has, 4,500. They should have a dedicated rep. They don't. The other town on the other side has got even less. They have a dedicated rep because at the time they did it, he was Republican. And so what they do is they take the extras and they said, all right, well, you should have 2 reps. Well, you share them across these 3 communities. And so I wasn't replacing an incumbent. I wasn't doing it. And I ran as an undeclared. I wouldn't raise any money, wouldn't collect any money, hand painted signs, would go to the towns, get on my bike and ride around, and I got crushed. But my goal was, I'm on a whole bunch of boards. One of them is New Hampshire Ranked Choice Voting. And I'm at the election law, testifying and talking about it. And the state reps, they're like, well, I'm not going to support this because it could put my party at a disadvantage. And I'm like, who cares about your party? It's not about your party. But they're literally saying, I'm not going to support this because it's bad for my party. You're supposed to represent the people. And so some of the statements from these people was just astounding. And, I only ran, to go drive everyone nuts. And I was literally going to, they're saying you have to caucus with Republicans and Democrats. It's not written anywhere you have to do that. Those are the party rules. So yes, they wouldn't assign me to anything, but I was going to sit in the middle. I was going to sit in the aisle. And just call people out for the partisanship. So anyway, that was my only time running for state office. Locally, I'm on the planning board, budget committee, a whole other bunch of stuff.
So those are more nonpartisan
Well, yeah,
positions?
they're supposed to be. It's town stuff.
Mhm. That makes sense.
Yeah. And I'm the moderator for the water district, but that means nothing.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, that kind of goes into another discussion point, which is like, what is the current state of politics in New Hampshire and what kind of led you to this initiative?
So, two-part question. So the atmosphere is the same way it is across the country. People don't talk to each other. They're scared of talking anything, and it's a huge issue because for democracy to work, you've got to have discussion because it's only when you talk about something, you have to explain something, it makes you organize your thought. And that's the only time you really understand, do I know something? Am I just regurgitating it? Because if you're full of BS and you're having a person-to-person discussion, it's going to come out. You're going to know it, and the person you're talking to is going to know it. Unfortunately, we don't have discussions. Even, my office, people like the other day, like one of the guys, they were talking about what happened with Israel, and he's like, doesn't it make you nervous that, they've got a senile fool, run in the White House, and we've got a military emergency, and, he's incompetent. It's like, I don't even think about that. But he's listening to something that's all they're talking about is that Biden's too old, and so and our oldest son wrote this. I think I might have seen the link. It's great, The Grace in Politics.
Yeah,
And
that's
our
a great
oldest son
article.
went canvassing, and just the image of him standing on someone's front door, and we're having a discussion, but we're living in two different realities. You mean they're both are getting their information from different places, and and they're calling it facts. Okay, it's not facts; it's information that you've digested. And he tried to find common ground, but it's we're not engaged, we're not talking, we're staying in a little world, and it is the worst thing for a functioning democracy. So that was the first goal. What's the second part of that question?
Well, I mean, in terms of how's that affected like things at the local state legislature level?
It's bad.
Yeah.
The I don't want to call it cancer, but the negativity and that partisanship it's worked its way into the local level. So in New Hampshire, there used to be a group called the Main Streeters. So we got this 400-person state reps. There was a whole bunch of moderate Republicans. And so, we had some Democrats, had Republicans, but if you wanted to get anything done, you had to go to these moderates called the Main Streeters. And they negotiate. That's how things worked in the 70s, the 80s, into the 90s. Well, the far, the right got really organized and they're very effective. The Democrats just are incapable of doing anything. All right. And so the Republicans systematically eliminated the Main Streeters. And so they pretty much got rid of anyone in the New Hampshire House that is a moderate. And the people, because of the way the primary system works, whether you send 30% of the people showed up in our state primary, you tend to get the most right, the most left, and they don't work together. And so many people that have served in the House have left because it's not any good. And one of the stories too, somebody that she manages the building, I was trying to get the room to use once to have a thing to support independence. And I was talking to her, and she said the worst thing that happened was when this hotel burned in Concord. Because what happened is the legislators used to go there and stay over. And you would just go have your breakfast or your dinner with whoever was there. And you talked, you got to know each other. All right. And she said, that was also a turning point where there's nothing, no systems, nothing for the people to get to know each other as people. And so the partisanship, the not working together, it's really gotten bad. And even at the local level, we've got people that are Republicans running for office. They are so unqualified. So, but the party is putting pressure for them to get on school boards, library boards. And it's like, terrible choices. They mean well, but so it's degrading quickly.
I mean, there's some talk I've been hearing about like a third space, like there's work, there's home, and then we're running out of like third spaces where people like interact. and have, communion with each other in community. It sounds like the third space that the politicians had literally burned to the ground. So where else
Yeah,
are they going to like literally meet, right?
yeah,
In a
and you gotta
Mhm.
you gotta remember that politics is the process we use for managing our government. And politics really shouldn't be a dirty word or something we run away from. I mean, it is the process we use to manage all those services we're paying. And we're doing a terrible job at it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I definitely agree with you there. I mean, there isn't anybody else to do a lot of these services other than the government, but we should do a better job of managing it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so, there are some, and that's the thing is, we're probably getting into this later, but you take the person on the farthest left, the farthest right, there's going to be some level of government services they agree on having. And, that needs to be a focal point that we need to work around. Even last night with the Walls and JD Vance, the debate, there were things that they agreed on the endpoint. We can agree on things. How we get there, they're different. All right. And there's going to have to be some compromise, but there is no more compromise. So, there's a lot of things that we agree on, what we'd want, what we'd like. But, because it's my way or no way, nothing gets done.
Yeah, you have all this gridlock and at the state level as well as the national level. I don't think people realize quite how much gridlock is happening at the state and local level in a way that is actually in some ways more damaging to them
Yeah.
than the national level.
Yeah. So Monday night I ran, like, I don't know if you know about no labels, but I'm involved in them too. And they asked a bunch of us in each district to host a discussion. So I signed up, and it was on the budget. And I'm reading the primer they have on the budget. And it's like, we spend like $6.1 trillion. All right. And so, that's, forget about the borrowing debt. And I was like, how, we always say that the US government's the biggest corporation in the world. Well, how much bigger? So I went and added up the revenue from the biggest companies in the world. Our government is bigger than the top 14 biggest corporations in the world. And it's running so inefficiently, ineffective, wasting. And the people that we pay to come up with a budget, our Congress, they're not even doing their jobs. They're being paid to come up with a budget and make sure that the operations that deliver our services work and we get what we need. They're not even doing what we're paying them to do.
Yeah, this whole continuing resolutions thing is so discouraging. But I heard in the news that not only have they been doing this continuing resolution thing, they haven't even really done like spending bills the way they're supposed to for decades. Like
Correct.
the way they're doing it right now is just like a stopgap measure every election cycle.
Yeah, there's supposed to be 14 appropriation bills. They're supposed to do it. And, but you think of a business that's going to be competitive and be efficient could never do that kind of stuff. And it's our money that's being so poorly used. And our older son worked for, had an internship this summer for the State Department. And he's like, what's going to happen? He said, well, no one can plan anything because they don't know what's going to happen. It's like they're still understaffed. It's well, because they can't.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things when Trump came into office that is in The Fifth Risk with Michael Lewis's book. In certain departments, if not a lot of departments, 1 in 5 positions was left empty. They just didn't hire somebody. And for a department like the Department of Energy, which I didn't know this until I read it in Michael Lewis's book, half their job is protecting and getting rid of nuclear uranium around the world. And managing the uranium that's around the world and keeping track of it and hunting it down and finding ways to like get rid of it in safe ways. Like 1 in 5 people doing that are just not there.
It doesn't get done, or there's a poor job.
Yeah, there's no other like private corporation that's going to do that, right? That's something only the government is going to do. So yeah. So how did the like dysfunction that you were seeing around you in the New Hampshire politics lead to like this initiative that you worked with the people on?
Well, so nothing's a short story. So I think you're getting the gist. Any nonpartisan activity for the last 20, 25 years in New Hampshire, I sort of get sucked into. And so I'm involved with just about all of them. And in 2019, when the people came through, they came to Portsmouth, Katie Fahey and Andrew Shue, and someone said, we heard you're into nonpartisan stuff. Can you come? So I've been involved since they did that first trip into New Hampshire. So I've been involved with the people. And then I'm what they call a House of Delegates, which is sort of like we're not on the board, we're just like a sounding board for what they're doing and strategy. And I've got involved in some of their national committees and stuff like that. Just like I've been involved with No Labels since the beginning, stuff with Braver Angels, so I'm on the House of Delegates. So they came to wanted to do this New Hampshire together. And I had actually been to the sounding board to try to, flush things out. Doesn't make sense, blah, blah, blah. And, when it started up, like, of course I have to say yes. And so when I helped Martha Madsen, who used to run New Hampshire Civics, she's running it. I've worked with Martha for a while. And, so I just said, just tell me what you need me to do. And at that point, they just needed me to be a participant. So that was great.
And so what was involved in the project and participating?
So the Citizens Assembly, I thought was fabulous. They tried to get a representation across the state, age, color, county, political affiliation. They did their best to try to mirror the state as best as they can. And we went to one of the colleges, St. Anselm's, in the middle of the state. And, we met there and spent a weekend with people that were like me. They cared. They want things to be better. And so even though it was a precious summer weekend, I got to, some of the people were really smart, had information I didn't have, others, but we essentially, what the whole process was, we did listening groups across the state where Martha went, and I helped, obviously did a lot with that. And they flushed out what some of the main themes were. And so they had 4 or 5 main themes that people, through those listening sessions across the state, said that they wanted to engage around. And what happened is you showed up there, you got assigned to a table and your main theme. And what happened is you went into with your theme. It's like mine was, trying to, help the legislative move more effectively, and there was other, I forget the whole list of them. But you would have your theme and then you would meet and say, what do you want to do? And then you'd present your first set of ideas to everybody. But now you're broken up at your table. And what would happen is they had a scribe. So a group would present what they wanted to do and then ask questions around the table. And everyone would, their comments, their questions, their feedback. And then you would vote with these little voter things. Would you support this? 1 no, 5 yes. And so you would go back to your breakout room, and here's the feedback from all these tables. All right. And so then you'd iterate it. Now, some of the groups broke into 2. I was one that, we split up because half people wanted to go this way, half wanted to go that way. We had state representatives there. We had people from the Secretary of State's office. We had subject matter experts that were there to help the people that didn't have the background. The subject matter experts were floating around. And so you went through over the weekend several of these iterations till you got it as fine tune as you could. And then you do your final presentation. And anything that 75% of the people supported, move forward. And so I think there were 4, that cleared the hurdle. And we're moving forward. So I get a little bit involved with the redistricting one, but the one I'm spending most of my time is moving to a single ballot primary. Now, my ideas got shot down when I was presenting my subgroup. We did terrible, but I learned, but so I let that one go, and I'm putting everything I can into helping to figure out what we have to do to have a single ballot primary.
So can you describe what a single ballot primary is and how it's different from the current one?
So right now you got to register Republican or Democrat or undeclared. If you're a Republican and you want to vote in the primary as a Democrat, if you don't do it before June 5th or the first Tuesday of the month, something like that, you can't change your party. Okay. So if you're a Republican or Democrat, you don't make a change before that date in the primary and cemetery, you're stuck. So our oldest son, put a bunch of Democratic signs in front of the house and realized he was still registered Republican. He took a bet. Like, I can't even, he found a couple, Democratic candidates he wanted to support, but it turns out he was still registered Republican. Now an undeclared voter can go in and say, I want to be Republican. Today I want to be a Democrat. And they'll give you a red or pink or blue ballot. And then when you finish, if you're an undeclared, you can go, I'm a Democrat, write down a Republican. So, and then you can switch back to undeclared. So you've got two ballots you have to manage. You got to check the parties of everyone. It's all right. And then you've got these restrictions around do it because as an undeclared voter, well, I like somebody in the Republican governor's race, and I like some people in the Democratic congressional race. I can't. I got to pick one or the other. But I'm not a Republican or Democrat. I'm prohibited from, having influence on my choices. And so a single ballot would be they would all be on one ballot. No more pink, no more. This is a green ballot with the candidates. If they want an R, a D, or an L, or whatever, they could be there. And for governor, here's the 10 people running for governor. There's my choice. Congress, there's my choice. We don't have to keep track at the primary Republican, Democrat, and then just, and just vote.
So does that mean like for the regular election that it would just be like a runoff, really?
Well, so that would be the primary. And then, we still have to let the listen, who moves forward. Like Alaska, my personal opinion is do it like Alaska does, where they have that single ballot primary and then ranked choice voting. California does it similarly. Washington does it. A whole bunch of states have ranked choice voting and single ballot primaries on the ballot in November. But one of the reasons why the people is in New Hampshire, we don't have referendums. So Maine has got ranked choice voting because the people were able to sign petitions and do it. We can't do that. All right. If we want to change things, we've got to go to the gerrymandered, polarized representatives in the Senate and the House and try to get them to do something that helps the people, which they're not. They're more motivated about helping their party than the people.
Yeah,
but it's not everyone. So most people I found, whether it's the U.S. Congress, they go in with the best of intentions, but they realize the system's skewed. There's only one way of getting things done. It's playing with the people in power make the rules.
Yeah, and I think people underestimate just how much systems affect how people behave and how things happen. And when you have a system that rewards the extremes, then you're going to get more extremes. If you have a system that rewards the center, which I think a single vote primary. Yeah.
So right now, when for somebody that ran for my District 38 seat, the Republican and Democrat had to either pay $2 and get I should have pulled out 10 petitions that they can go to the city clerk. They know the city clerk, the town clerk, she's there. Boom. I had to get 150. All right. And I couldn't go to the town clerks who they're there and they have posted office hours. Mine have to go to two supervisors of the checklist that have to be together to sign it. So it's, a low hurdle and a high hurdle. It's not even the same process. The numbers are different, it's just stacked against anyone but the two parties.
Wow. That is like discrimination. outright discrimination right there.
But it runs rampant.
Wow.
But the two parties, it's a duopoly. And the
Yeah.
duopoly, all they care about is keeping it like as so. Because you got to remember, this is one of my favorite quotes from mine. Our government runs incredibly effectively and efficiently for those with the money. Because it doesn't matter what side you're on, you pay the money, you're the lobbyists, the things, and you tip the playing field, and you get the laws and everything else changed so your business can maximize profit. All right. And the system works for them. It doesn't work for everybody else.
Yeah. And
well, it's not working for everyone else. It's only working like that because all of us let it be like that.
And even like right now, I used to be an independent for about 20 years. I turned Democratic Party in 2016 because I think we're in an existential crisis. But I don't think this extremes situation is even good for the parties. I mean, look what's happened to the Republican Party being taken over by their extreme right flank, So even if, you're a member of one of the parties, the system sucks for them as well, because it makes them so vulnerable to their own extremes.
Yeah, because so you've got the Trump, who's he's working out of the fascist playbook, and fascist dictators are duly elected by the people. All right, cloaked in patriotism. None of those people that supported fascist dictators ever thought they were evil or bad or doing something. They were doing it with the best intentions. Like a lot of people in our country, they think they're doing what's best for their country and what they should be doing. All right. And the other side is, we go through a campus, you see the support for Palestine and all this stuff. And it's like, release the hostages. Release the hostages. I mean, so I want nothing to do with those people. I mean, so there isn't the Republican Party's, orchestrated by fascist plans. We saw Liz Cheney speak the other week.
Mm-hmm.
And, some of the things she said, it's like, these people without the spines that don't have the courage to stand up against Trump, we're going to let them rule after him? No, these are the people that were too weak to put country first.
Yeah. 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 It's, you don't have fascism without enablers. And unfortunately, the leadership is enabling the very worst of all of us. But yeah, I mean, the far left, anti-Semitism, I soundly condemn that in every way, shape, and form. Yeah. But what's happening in Gaza is a catastrophe as well. So it's
like I said,
an awful situation.
No one wants how things are.
Yes.
But, how we get there is like, the duly elected government of Palestine, attacked Israel, slaughtered, raped, killed people, and they're holding hostages. Yeah. And the duly elected government of Palestine releases them.
Yes.
Then, but you can't be, the people elected, the people that you're holding the hostage are still being held. If they're even still alive.
Yeah, I would argue that they're duly elected though, because they came into power in 2005, the Hamas regime, and they never left. So I would argue that they're not duly elected, but it's just awful.
We'll
they're
strike
terrorists.
that the ruling government.
Yes, they are still the ruling government, and they were some very, very bad forces kept them in power. So I guess I want to shift gears here, though. This is a really good discussion, but I don't want to forget to get to. So for this initiative that you're working on right now, are you starting to see like signs that it's working, that things are going in the right direction, or is it still a lot of work left to do?
Yeah, so it's still early. So we've gotten some good response from Secretary of State. People that, unfortunately, a lot of the House reps are running after elections. So it's hard to get their bandwidth, and then we've got to move quickly. But, the people has been great with the resources they're giving to this. And, it's some of the heavy lifting to get done. And I mean, it's a hard question. How do you drive democratic reforms in a non-ballot initiative state? And, you know, I'm on the board of New Hampshire ranked choice voting, and we've been banging our heads against the wall for 4 years now. All right, because the Republicans view it as partisan. And even the Democrats, they were mad at somebody in the Democratic leadership, sort of, pulled a fast one to try to get the bill across. So, it's a system that works better for the people, and we can't get it through.
Yeah.
So, and it's hard, but it's, and one of the challenges is, even with the New Hampshire Together, how do you get the people? How do you get organized? How do you get how do you get effective grassroots doing? Because most, people, the parties focus on emotional issues to turn out the vote. And that's what you hear. You hear the Republicans, they use the fear level. It's their favorite friend. And, the Democrats, the same, they use that to motivate, but that's just a vote. All right. What we need people is engaged, like one of my colleagues in the Civic League, his favorite quote is, voting is the period at the end of the democratic sentence. So it's one thing. You still got to do the rest of the sentence. And we're struggling to get people to put the period down. Never mind finish the rest of the sentence.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that, I've talked about before, but I don't think it can be said enough. We're encouraged in this country to be consumers and spectators and not citizens. And citizens aren't just about, what our rights are. Citizens are also, citizenship is also about what our responsibilities are to our communities. And I don't think that gets thought about enough, and people don't consider it enough, like their personal responsibility for how their community operates and how it functions.
Yeah. So when I get on my stump speech for my book, Consuming Government, hence the name, I use that consumers, because government's a service and we buy it. And I say to people, it's like, picture everything you pay in federal taxes, what you pay in state taxes, local, add all that up. For most of us, it's the biggest thing we buy every year. Now picture yourself and going to Best Buy or Costco, whatever, and spending that much money on one thing that you don't really need, doesn't work that well, all right? And coming back next year and paying even more for the same thing. All right, we would never do that. If we bought a car, we'd raise a stink. We'd put our homework in, all right? But, we spend so much money, our money, and we're irresponsible because the founding fathers, people argue they're slave traders, they're bigots, racists, but they understood human nature enough that they realized you had to have skin in the game. And that's why they originally said to vote, you had to own property, because they understood if you didn't have that skin in the game, you wouldn't make the time and the effort to make sure whoever you're forking that money over to is going to do a good job with it. And so that's one of the pillars that have fallen apart. We talked about it also earlier. There's no more discussion and debate. You mean back 250 years ago, especially in New Hampshire, January, February, March, what did you do? There was nothing to do. You didn't talk about the Patriots because they're too painful. You didn't talk about baseball. You didn't talk about hard to talk about world news. You talked about the weather, your job, and politics. And you talked about these things. And there were newspapers. Yeah, they were slanted. They were a right, a left, but you knew it and you read them all. All right. And then you'd have discussions and but those are the things that are gone. And they're initial conditions that our founding fathers always assumed would be there, and they've evaporated. And that's, why we're not doing a very good job of managing our government.
So with your book, Consuming Government, what would you say, like, bullet points of like what you hope people to take away from the book?
So the book I was hoping is a bunch of ideas that people would say, I'm going to start to do something. Here's an idea I like in the book, and I'm going to get involved in this. The whole idea is that I just threw a bunch of things, ideas I had collected, put some structure, created a vernacular we could use to talk about things so that we could start to, do a better job. And we've got to start at the bottom. Like I said, start locally, the person on the left, the right. What do we agree? Work together. Are we getting good value? We're going to pay more. We're getting better. And rebuild those skills from the bottoms up about how to better manage our government. Now, you can argue things like, campaign finance reform and other things. Yeah, they'll move the needle a little bit. But the real solution is like you said, to get people to be more civically responsible. And we have to rebuild a culture where we view who we are, and part of what we do is being civically responsible for the money we're handing over. Just do it out of selfish means. Not some great altruistic thing. It's like you're handing over money, you need to be responsible to make sure it's being used properly. It's yours. So
do you have an example of this process at the local level in like a real world case?
Well, so the Civic League, I would love to, rinse and repeat. So I'm the president of the Rye Civic League. And if you move
and Rye is where you live? Rye is where you live?
Rye is where I live, not
Okay.
R-Y-E.
Okay.
And, you move from a city to a small town meeting. How does it work? There is no newspaper. If you're going to be involved, you've got to be educated and informed. So two main things the Civic League does is a newsletter comes out once a month. Just the key things, what I'm at select board, what I'm at planning, what I'm at school board, with links to more information, because we have to work together to put the information digestible, because we're all busy. If you got a couple kids, you work, you can't. But so we've got to help each other. There's more of us than there are problems. If we all do a little bit, we could do that. So we put out the Civic News once a month. If you move to the town, it wasn't covered. How does it work? How does a town meeting work? So we actually created the Citizens Guide. This is how, the SB2, this is how town meeting works. This is, so we do that. And then every year we do a budget analysis presentation. No one looks at the budget. They look this year and next year. You have to look at it over history. What's the trends? What's happening? No one uses their job to do that analysis. So, we do that because really what you got to figure out is, for what we're paying for police, are we getting twice the services their neighbor? Could be a great deal. Or we could be paying twice as more and getting half the, we don't know. And that's what we've got to work together to figure out. So ideally, that's, what I'd like to see happen. And to get people, this comes out, well, it's like, you may be good at, let's say, podcasts. So your role is you make little podcasts about things. Somebody else may be good at this, whatever you're interested in, or you've got skills, that's what you can contribute. And it doesn't have to be, your whole life, everything, when the time's right in your life, and it can't be all the old people like it is right now. All right, I've got some 20-somethings that work in the office with me, and they do nothing. They play video games, sports bet, It's like, no, they should be more involved, but it's just ain't happening.
Yeah, I am kind of alarmed by how disconnected people are. And we'll talk about that later. But yeah, just how disconnected people are and how that is fueling this rage in politics.
Yeah. So that the goal of the book is just to help people, talk and to be a catalyst to try to get involved. I talk about what we do in the Civic League, some other things. And if you want to make me one of your book club things, we could talk through the different sections. But that was the intent. So
that's amazing, because I live in a big California city. I live in Los Angeles, and I didn't even realize until a couple of years ago that my city council person lives down the street from me. And I didn't realize that I had to do everything I could to not get her elected because she's anti a lot of the things I believe in. And she's taken money from all the wrong organizations. And so it was like, I kind of had to have an awakening about it really is all local. Like I was so plugged into the national election stuff, but the stuff that's happening at the state, at the local level is so much more important for my day-to-day life.
But it's impossible for any of us, except for
Yes.
like wingnuts like me, all right, that understand what's going on in the town, county, state, federal. We have to work together to help each other out. And you can't blame the media because it was never their job. No one ever said, came from the founding fathers, media you shall do. All right. It's a business and their job is to make money. Fox Entertainment isn't a news, it's a news entertainment thing. And you can't get mad at them because they found a niche and they're serving it and they're making money. That's what they're supposed to be doing. All right. But so what do we do in the meantime? Because our local paper it's treading water if they're not drowning already. Some of the people in our local newspaper, they only get paid 3 weeks out of 4.
Wow. Yeah, local papers. I was hoping when I was on Facebook that Facebook in some cases is, filling the gap, but in a lot of cases, not so much.
It's worse.
Yes, because all the misinformation. Yeah. So, so this actually brings me to another topic or continuation of the previous topic of, like, I know you're a member of a lot of civics organizations like the Rise Civic League. We have a loneliness epidemic in this country, which lots of scientists and medical professionals attribute to not joining clubs. Can you speak a bit about your civic engagement and why you think joining political organizations is important, like joining clubs?
All right, so you're talking about the bowling alone issue. Now the problem is that with bowling alone, people need to do things that are fun. This isn't very fun. I've been going to select board meetings for 15 years. It ain't fun. Okay. But why do I do it? Well, because I don't golf or fish, but I know I'm helping. And so that's what I get out of it. All right. And yeah, I've met some neat people. But if we can find, connect with people doing these civic things that you could enjoy spending time with, it's got to be fun. It's got to, because that's why people did those things. That's why they went bowling. It was fun. And you had discussions and you do it. So we've got, if we can come up with ways of having these activities, be fun and get something. And sometimes it's getting out of your comfort zones. But if we're going to manage our government better, we have to work together. We got to communicate better. And we've got to, all doing some things. And like I said, if you got two little kids, you and your spouse are both working, it may not be the best time. But as they get older, you do something. Or before you have kids, you could come and go. And because there's more of us than there's complexities to help us with. We just aren't choosing to carve out the time. My dad always said, there's time for the things you make time for. And people aren't choosing to make time to better manage our government. So, we've got to, those of us that are care, got to figure out how to make it fun, make it interesting, make people feel like it's a worthwhile, part of their time. So we haven't cracked that nut yet.
I got to say for myself, in 2020, I was doing some phone banking and other, some political stuff. I just felt so isolated. But in 2024, I'm phone banking as part of a local group that's been doing it since 2008. And I got to say, like, joining that group has made it more fun. And even when you get like a really like negative person on the other end of the line and 20 hangups in like, North Carolina or Michigan or wherever you're calling, when you have that group to come back to, even if it's over Zoom, you just support each other. You give each other advice. You pick each other up, and then you can go back and fight another day. So yeah, I think yes.
Yeah, or you go and get a cup of coffee afterwards. You go get an ice cream, and time there you go by in the store. You get, because we just don't interact anymore. We all live in our cocoons and we tend to move and live in homogeneous thing. People, we have massive group think.
Yeah. I mean, you're starting to see that with this election, the group think with the polling and things like that. I'm trying to like actually tune it out because I don't think it actually reflects the fundamentals or any facts on the ground.
Well, with the polling's like we've got a landline, but you're never going to see us pick it up.
No.
I mean,
I think it's broken. I think it's broken, honestly, especially for younger voters. And yeah, and also like polling now feels a little bit like, in the medieval court of Elizabeth I, or they'd have the court astrologer. Polling right now feels like the court astrologer of our politics. So maybe it's a little more scientific than that, but it doesn't feel much more scientific than that.
Yeah, and how do the polls help us? The polls don't help us. They give the talking heads we should go out and have more discussions about people,
and also get make our own judgments based on talking to people.
Yes.
In those battleground states. I feel like I have some insights based on just talking to people over the phone, canvassing or phone banking, that I would never have just listening to the talking heads.
Yeah.
So I did want to definitely bring up I read the article on is it the Bowdoin Orient? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. So Bowdoin's a school up in Brunswick, Maine, and that's our older son who writes for the school newspaper.
He wrote a great article, and I just wanted to talk about, because this is something I think about with my nephew, like how, like he mentioned a year or two ago, of course he's very young, he's like, why vote? Like he doesn't get it yet. And like, how did you and your family approach like instilling democratic values in your children?
You got to feel bad for our kids.
Yeah.
So, these kids are little, and I'm dragging them around the neighborhood, trying to build a group to pull and buy energy. All right. I'm taking them and it's like, I'm at a football game with our older one. It's like, he's embarrassed. Like, that's the governor. I'm going to go, I got him in my arm and I'm going to talk to the governor about some wingnut idea I have. And then, we took him, dragged him to go see all the presidential, can't see. And of course, every time we vote, we dragged him through the voting booths with us. We made sure we did that. And so we're fortunate now. We've got two boys that get up in the morning and listen to podcasts. They both debate. They both did Model UN. We have two really engaged children.
I remember that from when I was a kid. I remember accompanying my parents to our local elementary school for voting day. I have very distinct memories of that from my childhood.
Yeah. And they see, my wife and I, we both on boards. We're both doing stuff all the time. We don't sit around and watch. We don't watch TV. We're doing things.
So, a lot of it's just modeling the kind of behavior you want your kids to emulate.
Well, actually, we didn't do it because we did it because that's who we are. That's what we do.
Right. Yeah. That's such a struggle though, too, because it's like parents are understandably really busy with their kids and all their kids' activities. And then to do political stuff on top of that, that's a big,
but you've got to go back to the political stuff. Politics is how we manage our government, and it's just being responsible. All right, so voting, yes, is important, but understanding what's going on, being informed. That's every adult should be doing that, especially the ones that forking over the money.
Yeah, well, that's a lot of tax money over the course of, just thinking about it over my lifetime,
Yeah.
I'm like grateful for our government and all the services it provides, but I think opening the books and having more input of how that money gets spent and having it go further is like a net good,
Yeah, so that's one of the concepts in the consuming government is that we can choose to have the most cost-effective and efficient delivery of services in the world. That can be a global competitive advantage that could fuel our economy for generations. So for what we spend, all right, on services, to make sure we're getting the most value or better value for less money year over year. All right. And what that does is frees up capital for either investments or leisure. All right. And so we can choose to do that.
Or more services, like if you believe in child credits and other things. Yeah.
Yeah. So the first time I was watching, like, it might have been like a Democrat giving some speech, and it's like, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. In the back of my head, how are you going to pay for that? It's like, yeah, I'd love to do that, but how are you going to pay for that? And it's like, it came up in the no labels because, would you, pay more taxes? Yes, I would pay more taxes if and only if I knew all the money I'm already giving is being used effectively. And it's our job to figure that out and make sure it is. And we're doing it. We can't expect the people we elect to do it. We're already paying them for the jobs they're not doing. So that was a joke.
Yeah, especially Congress. Congress is definitely not doing that job. All right. So I've observed that the happy societies are high trust societies, which I think kind of comes back to like trusting that the money is going to what it's supposed to be going to. How do we create a higher trust society, in your opinion?
So do we need, yes, I forget who wrote the Why Nations Fail. But one of the premises that comes out of that book is that you have to trust your institutions. And we've got a massive lack of trust with our institutions. And that's a huge indicator that it's going to fail. I think we believe in the American people and the ability of the American people to come together and get things done, but not where it benefits people with a lot of money to keep to make sure we're at each other's throats. All right. And so we've got to, and that's why I do think we've got to start locally and set the expectations that, because people, I think, naturally already have enough trust at our local level. I will tell you, when I first started going to select board meetings, reading the meeting minutes, that's not what happened. So it was eye-opening, and I went to one town meeting and I showed up and they're like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I don't know what you guys do. So do you mind if I just sit here?" And they were like, they weren't used to having anyone looking over their shoulder watching. Some people like it that way. They want they know better than everyone else. But, we've got to start locally and make sure that we're engaged. We understand what's going on. We're not just like demanding that they do all the work to make our lives easier. We either got to pay for it and hire more people or do it ourselves. And so, we could choose to hire more people so we get the information and know they're doing, or we can all start doing more to build that trust and have that society where we do have faith in our institutions.
Yeah, I honestly think, like, I went to my first local meeting a couple months ago, or within the last year. And it was actually hard to go because it was at a time that I'm usually working, because I work quite long hours. And honestly, I think a lot of this stuff is scheduled so people don't show up,
The other one, did anyone ever teach you how to engage at a public meeting?
No, nobody ever taught me that. It was very eye-opening to see people,
we don't teach and educate our kids. So we're paying for kids our youth to go to public schools, and they're not graduating understanding how to be an engaged citizen. We're not giving them the skills they need to manage all the money that our government's going to be taking from them. So we should be teaching people, you got to say who you are, where you live. All right. It's not a chance to tell your life story. All right. If somebody else raised your point saying, I support that person. All right. We've got to be, people just don't understand. You got to be respectful of other people's time. No one wants to be here for 3 hours.
Or even just understanding Robert's Rules of Order. My dad did, when I was a kid, tell me, go read that. Because that's how all the meetings on Earth are run.
Yeah, I was our ninth grade. I was our ninth grade student class president. My father was so happy, he went out and bought me Robert's Rules of Procedure.
Yes. Yeah, that stuff. I mean, that was my dad. He handed it to me like it wasn't school, it wasn't civics class. The other question I'm asking the people I'm interviewing is like one of the blocks I come across in talking to disaffected citizens is the idea that one person can't make a difference, one vote can't make a difference. What do you say to that belief?
Um, you we've learned from some elections, one vote does. I've lost some warrant articles in town by 3 votes. Okay. But it doesn't matter if one vote doesn't make a difference. It's still your responsibility. All right. You're still handing over money and you've got to be informed, educated and participate. All right. If you don't complain and shut up and maybe pay some more money. All right. But our culture needs to change where we expect it of each other, to make, and we've got to help each other do that. So it took a long time to get this screwed up. It's going to take a long time to get unscrewed up, but we've got to try. Look at, I could go on for hours about everything I've tried and failed, but I'll keep on trying. We have to. We don't have a choice. I look at our kid. Our boys. I'm going to be old someday. Our boys are at least going to look at me and say, "Dad, you tried." All right, I was brought up. You give 110%. If you don't give 110%, you can't really feel good about yourself. And so give 110%, and we'll do what we can. I'm not a complainer.
I really liked part of what you said about, well, I liked everything you said, but the one part that really stood out to me was about how you have to educate yourself to vote. And that the educating yourself to vote is the point, like whether the vote counts or not. I've also seen votes in statewide elections in like North Carolina that came down to 400 plus votes. So one vote does make a tremendous difference. But that argument aside, like educating yourself to vote is part of the process and is part of the point,
And we have to help each other. So the Civic League, we're running a candidates night. Another group, Open Democracy, I worked with, they've come up with little images about, half the people don't know what executive counselor is. We have undervotes. People vote for the top of the ticket. They don't vote for the bottom of the ticket. Those bottom of the ticket people actually have more direct influence, all right, than anything. Your local elections, where you've got more direct influence, your vote matters more, and it affects you more directly than what the president or governor will do. And people, they choose not to understand. They choose not to make the time.
Yeah, I mean, I only got like more aware of this in the last 8 years. Like 2016 was kind of a tipping point for me in terms of understanding, like, if you don't have power locally, you do not have power. There's just no power that can make up for not having power locally.
Yeah. And if we do this, I was talking at the local level, making sure we're getting better services for less money. We start building that wave up. The people at the county, they'll see it coming. And it will set the expectation. So we can start building some momentum. So, start the heavy work now, start locally, small things, digestible things, and build towards driving that. That's what we'll be able to do.
The other thing that occurs to me is a lot of elected officials work their way up in politics. So if you train them at the school board stage, the state elector stage, the mayor stage to be responsible with the budget, they take those skills with them when they get elected to higher office and higher office and higher office.
But don't depend on them.
Yes.
They will be like that if they know we're watching, we're paying attention. All right. Because, our town used to give this spreadsheet. That's all they gave you. I'm like, this is useless. All right. And so I put in the effort to make it digestible. All right. And that's what it's the people's responsibility to do that. And so the town is now doing a better job. Our school is doing a better job of giving us the information on the budget that's understandable. But that's our job as a consumer to ask for it. And if they need more money to do it, then we either have to give it to, or do it ourselves.
One of the things that you've really talked about a number of times during this interview is like opening the books and then having a really good understanding of what the government books look like. And I think like first thing that comes to mind is the fact that the Pentagon has never had an accurate audit of how they spend their money. Even if you agree with every single cent the Pentagon is spending, they should have an audit of where the money is going. So us as citizens and consumers of being, protected by the Pentagon and by the military understand how it's being spent,
But the Pentagon's a pretty big mouthful.
Yes.
Okay. We need to start doing that locally and build those skills.
Yes.
And a couple things have got to happen. We've got to set the expectations for what are the services we want. What's the level of services? What are our expectations? So we need to say, this is what we expect from police, fire, schools. What do you mean? 25% of our kids are inefficient in math. That's unacceptable. All right. But we also need to do the analysis of the numbers. So we need to, all right. And no one is doing that analysis. Numbers on a spreadsheet with a variance from year to year is not analysis. All right. Open secrets is great on the federal level, like where the money came from, but it's all too late. Somebody's got to be doing the analysis and doing that breakdown and saying, your senator is owned by boom, boom, and boom. In October, we need that. Not, when everything gets reported in December. They're bought and paid for by these PACs. And who's funding these PACs? Open secrets makes that information, but they don't do the analysis. People have got to step up and do the analysis.
Yeah, the go-between of like the people in like accountants or people who understand numbers who can actually give that information to the rest of us.
Yeah, transparency is nice. That just means that it's there. What does it mean? What's it telling us? So that's where we have to step up and if somebody's got those skills, they do it. Somebody may have the skills of doing it at the Pentagon level. Somebody may have the skills of doing it at the school board level. We all, and somebody may be able to get the numbers, but somebody else is better at presenting them. We just got to, whatever it is we do, we like to do, we find an interest, we've all got to, around those things, start choosing to contribute more of our time so we help each other. There's ants, there's gazillions of us. We just need to be coordinated and effective, and we can do tremendous things. We're just scattered.
Yeah, you know what this makes me think of? It's like if you think of the government as a corporation, every citizen is a board member of this corporation.
Did you get that out of my book?
No, I just thought of it. If that's in your book, great minds think alike. But that's what I'm picturing, that we have to treat the government like a corporation, and a board member checks the books, makes the analysis in order to make the decisions, to make the votes. Yep. It's a very, very similar process.
Yeah, I say we failed in our responsibility as the board of the director.
Yeah,
we hire the people to manage our business, and we're failures.
Yeah, because we're not overseeing it. We're not overseeing the business properly.
Correct.
Yeah. So, wow, we've actually gone over time, but I wanted to make sure, did you have any thoughts you'd like to share with our audience before I ask the last question?
No, it's just, I think you asked that you brought it to like, does one vote matter? It's your money, and it's being responsible. We've got to change the civic culture, and talking with each other. So, I think, we've got so much more we agree on. It can work together, and we don't have to be divided, and, but we've got to choose to listen to each other and be great, being graceful to different points of view, and we'll agree on what that outcome is, and we'll we'll have to compromise on the path we take. But we can do it if we choose to.
Yeah. And like the idea you had that we can't all know it all, like we can't know everything at every level. But if a bunch of us, or if all of us know our piece of it and are responsible for our piece of it and learn about the rest from everybody else together, we can run this country a lot more efficiently,
Yeah, I think they call it the ground game.
Yes. that's why I have the name of my podcast, like everyone doing their little bit and every little bit counts. So my last question is my favorite question, because democracy is, why I'm doing this. It's my why. It's like I want to protect and promote democracy in our country, but it means so many different things to so many different people. So I like to ask, what does democracy mean to you?
Well, so I forget who said it, but it's the least worst choice of a bunch of bad options.
I think it's attributed to Winston Churchill, but I'm sure other people have said it.
But so, it's the best option, but not the way it's working. And so democracy, works where the people are responsible and not apathetic. They're engaged, they're participating. It to function well, it's got to be healthy. If not, parties that can rig the system will do it, and they have. All right. And if you brought up board of directors, but if you're a board of directors and your company isn't throwing tons of money at PACs to tipping the playing field, you've got a fiduciary responsibility to make sure your company is maximizing money. So if you're not pouring money into two campaigns, you're probably legally liable. And unfortunately, that's got to stop.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of money we spend on elections, especially the presidential election in this country,
I don't spend it.
is obscene. It's like even with obviously I'm for the Democratic ticket up and down because they're the pro-democracy party at the moment, but it's like $1 billion or more per campaign. Like, it's just that it just doesn't have to be that way. It's just there's so many better ways to spend that money,
Yeah, because it's all marketing. It all goes to, marketing to influence people for their votes, and then they walk away from the people.
Yes. Yeah. It's just every 4 years, and then you get ignored the rest of the time. Which, to a large extent, we've allowed to happen. I didn't want to forget, how do folks connect with you and your projects?
So actually, we didn't even talk about the common denominator newsletter. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I do is I put together a newsletter that comes out once a month for people in New Hampshire. And because I'm involved in all these nonpartisan groups, it's what's happening. So what Open Democracy is doing, Braver Angels, No Labels, what the people of New Hampshire Together, New Hampshire Civics 101, it's all there. Because there wasn't a place where anyone in New Hampshire can go. So it's on my book at the consumegov.com website. You can get to the CD newsletter, and people can join that newsletter and spread the word, because I just do it because there isn't any place people can go find out. We also found out that during COVID, I'm involved in all these groups, and we're all trying to have a Zoom meeting the same night. It's like, this ain't going to work. We've got to coordinate it, because we're all competing for the same pool of people. And so the best thing is the common denominator newsletter. If you want to get involved in nonpartisan activities across the state, that's probably the best thing to do. And then if anyone in New Hampshire or anywhere else wants to, build a civic league, we'd be more than glad to help them rinse and repeat. We'd love it to catch on.
Oh, that's great. I will definitely include that in the show notes for anybody looking for that. I looked at the common denominator newsletter, and it's just like a cornucopia of links and groups, and like there's like there's a little something for everybody to join, I think. If you're living in New Hampshire, I challenge you not to find at least one thing that you're interested in based on that newsletter.
Yep.
So excellent, excellent. I so enjoyed talking politics with you, Steven. And to our audience, please remember your values, your voice, and your vote matter. One citizen can make a difference. And who knows, you too may help your community heal from the partisan divides and forces of political warfare, pitting Americans against each other. And if you haven't already, check your voter status at iwillvote.com, make a plan to vote, and make sure all the folks in your circle have plans to vote, because the health of our democracy depends on you. Thanks for listening to the second episode of the Ground Game podcast. The plan is to continue releasing podcasts monthly between now and December. I can't wait to share my November podcast with you with one of the activists I admire most about her struggle to codify women's rights. To be notified when my November podcast is released, I invite you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to my Substack to get notified when a new episode of my podcast drops. If you want to reach out to me with thoughts, questions, or pro-democracy folks you believe should be interviewed, you can email me at thegroundgamepodcast@yahoo.com. I look forward to hearing from you.